Starting a conversation, tell us where you're from and what was your path that brought you to being a composer?
Well, I live in Brooklyn now, but I grew up in St. Louis, and I've been writing since I was pretty small. I wrote my first musical when I was 9 years old, and I was always sort of rewriting the pieces that I was supposed to be playing in my piano lessons, and my piano teacher said, "That's composing." So I just kept doing that, and I went to college for it, went to grad school in 2003 to the NYU Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program, thinking I was going to write exclusively musicals. I did have a brief detour prior to that as an opera singer, so I was learning the repertoire. But I met up with the librettist Royce Vavrek about 9 years ago, and because he was also in the program at NYU, and he said, "I think you should be writing opera. Let's try something." And we did, and I sort of never looked back.
We have reached the Rootabaga Country.
The Rootabaga Country.
When I came up with the idea for Rootabaga Country, it was actually an accident. I was applying to the commissioning competition, and I was going to adapt another story, and I was trying to get the rights to it, and that didn't come through in time. And so I frantically Googled public domain children's stories, and I came across Rootabaga Stories, which is the 1922 book by Carl Sandburg. And I knew of his work from when I was a kid. I didn't know this book, but I investigated, and as I suspected, I loved it immediately, and I knew that this was what I had to do. Definitely some technical considerations, range, etc., and their voices are still developing and evolving. And so the approach is not the same as it would be for a 40-year-old tenor and a 30-year-old mezzo, for example. It's a very different sort of process. And also considering the subject matter, there's things that you want to challenge them with, but you also need to keep them engaged, and so it's got to have a lively pacing to it as well.
So now you're here in Sarasota. How has it been over just the past 2 days that you've been here? How has it been watching this piece come to life?
It's really overwhelming in the best way possible. The resources that are here, the discipline that the kids have in learning this material, which is more complicated than it sounds like it is. It's really incredible to see how everyone has just risen to the occasion, and it's beyond my wildest expectations. I'm just thrilled every moment that I'm in the rehearsal room, and I can't wait to share it with everybody.
We stay facetious, stay bonkers, stay capricious. Put your pants on backwards, catch a flock of fireflies.
Well, the first thing that drew me to the stories in the first place was the wonderful use of language and the imaginative landscape that I really wasn't finding anywhere else in the classic children's stories that we all know and love. Peter Pan, Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, all of those things never really spoke to me, and they never held any fascination for me, but these stories were just like nothing else I had ever experienced, and I thought they would be so much fun to try to sing.
What's this? How bizarre, how absurd. We've never seen this happen. You must have made this happen.
The process was the better part of 2 years, so the competition itself was several months long with a couple of rounds. So I started by writing 20 minutes of the libretto and vocal score. For the next round, I had to finish the vocal score, and then there were some rewrites to that, and then eventually the orchestration. But I think the call for scores was March 2015, and obviously I had the process with trying to get those rights and finally settling on a story. Once I did, I think I wrote the first 20 minutes in like 3 weeks. So that probably, calculating back, I think that's somewhere mid-July or August of 2015. So it's been since then.
And so if you thumb your nose when the west wind blows, be sure to
these last few days, it's been so incredible to see the piece come alive, and especially all of the dedication that not just the people on stage putting all of the hard work into it, but the staff and the families and everyone who has really rallied around this piece. I'm so grateful to everyone. So the message of the show has a lot to do with families, both official and unofficial. So in this version of the story, they are trying to figure out things about their mother who has disappeared, and in the process, they learn that the people around them that they encounter become their unofficial family. And I think that that's a very important thing for us all to bear in mind in these times, that we not only have our blood relations, but our communities as well. So that's the first part of it. I also, just in a larger sense, would like people to not be afraid to laugh at the opera. I think that's very important. I think that's something that might be getting lost these days. And you know, I've been laughing at my own jokes as I've been writing this, but I'm really interested to see audiences embrace them as well. I sure hope that happens. And it should be a joyful experience as well as a touching experience for everybody. And then finally, I am really hoping that both the girls and young women on stage and also girls and young women in the audience can see that women write operas too. I think that's something that does get forgotten, although I believe that that might be shifting a little bit in our larger culture. But what I would really love more than anything is for some girl in the audience or on stage to say, you know what, she did that, I can do that too.